say you're given a task where you have to mass update multiple records from a given table. So you have this. So what you do is instantiate the glide records object. You plug queries. You execute that query, and you iterate through each of the matching records. And inside that loop is where you set your values. Right? Set field A, field B, and invoke update method to commit your changes. But the problem here is that there are times when it stops, when .next for some reason stops returning true, or I don't know, maybe it's doing some error, it triggers an error or whatever. So what we'll do, or what we'll show you, is a guaranteed way to make sure that it successfully updates all the matching records. I remember an issue in a certain project where we had to wonder why a scripted scheduled job stopped working. I mean, for example, there are 78 matching records, and for some reason the scheduled job stops updating records at the 34th record. Then when we execute that scheduled job again, it now has 45 matching records, but then for some reason it only updates up to the 47th record. Up to the 43rd record. So in that process, we were not able to figure out why. And so we came up with this approach, which is really use of an object, a key value object. So what we'll do, given this existing code, is convert that into this approach. So the first thing we need to do is declare an object, an empty object called payload. And inside this while loop, instead of using this loop to update those matching records, we will use this part to collect the records we need to update and what values have to be plugged into each of the records. So in this case, instead of setting those values and committing the update, we'll have to use the payload object. We will have to collect those values and put them into the payload. But first, we need to do is putting the identifier, which is the record ID. So we will declare the record ID variable in this case, and put in there the glide records sys ID. In this case, you'll have to use get unique value. And after that, that's the only time we have to plug those values into the payload object by setting the record ID, using the record ID as the object values key. And inside that is another object, and that's where we put in a key value pair to set those values. So in this case, instead of using set value, we'll do duration colon and then the corresponding value. So I think it's duration, and next is duration in months. Put in the duration in months. Right, so we don't have to use those lines in this part anymore. Next is, once we successfully collected all the records that can be updated or that should be updated. Second part is another loop here, and this time we'll iterate through each of the keys of the payload object. So going back here in lines 13 to 16, our key is the record ID, right? So if we iterate through each of the values from that object, we'll use the same value, which is record ID. The same variable. So for each record ID in payload, we will call get each of the row, which is a key value pair from that object, and say payload at this key, which is record ID, and that row is what we'll use to set the values. For example, like you can do here, glide records dot duration is equal to row dot duration, or however you want to call your object. Right, so in this case, I'll use glide records, and you call it from the same table, and you do gr.get, then record ID Once we do that, only then we can set those values. So there's a chance that we will put more fields in these lines of code in the future. So instead of us manually specifying them again here, or you can do something like this. Maybe this is how comfortable you are. So gr.duration and then row. Right, so you can do that approach. Right, or you can iterate through each of the keys from the row object. So in this case, for variable field, right? So the row object, that row object represents this key value pair we plugged back to the lines 13 to 16. So for variable field, that means for each field in this key value pair, we'll use that those keys to set the field. So we can't do this, right? Because the field is a variable, so it needs to be dynamic. So we have to do this. Glide record field is equal to, or you can also use set value if you want. Now you can use this. Right? You can use that, or you can also do this. Right? So in this case, I think I'll just use this approach instead. So set each of the fields to this corresponding value. And once we're done with that, then that's the only time that we commit those changes. That's a guaranteed approach to making sure that you can always successfully mass update all matching records from a query. So as a summary, we had to do a while loop to get all the records that have to be updated and their corresponding values or key value pairs. And the second loop is where we had to get those records and start doing the actual or committing the actual changes. Right. So I hope this has been very helpful to whatever you're doing relating to mass updating records in ServiceNow. All right. Cheers.